continuing to see cloudier skies and the risk of the odd shower. Could also see some showers moving in across the English Channel coasts as well, but I think for most of us we should stay dry overnight and into Tuesday. As I said, more in the way of sunshine to come on Tuesday. The best of the sunshine will be in the afternoon, particularly across parts of England and Wales. We've got an onshore breeze, quite a brisk northerly wind affecting many eastern coasts. That's going to bring a chillier feel once again, so we'll feel much closer to 2 or 3 degrees across parts of northeastern England, but across the south and west, with plenty of sunshine, it won't feel too bad at all. Clear skies continue into Tuesday evening. That will make for a very cold start to New Year's Eve. A widespread frost across much of the UK, and that cold feel will continue as we head into 2026, as there's a risk of snow developing, particularly over the high ground. Bye-bye.
Today, clouds overhead. Total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Thank you, Britain, for making GB News Radio such a huge success. Whether you're in the car, on the go, or listening at home, thank you for choosing us as your radio station.
Good evening. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. Significant delays on the A465 westbound from Neath to Landersea due to an accident closing one lane. In North Yorkshire, a collision on the A64 westbound causes a 20-minute delay. Meanwhile, in Salford, the M60 anti-clockwise between junctions 13 and 11 experiences congestion with 15-minute delays. The A1 northbound in Nottinghamshire has an overturned vehicle with one lane closed. In Norfolk, the A11 southbound is shut due to a collision. And on the trains, major engineering work affects Avanti West Coast services between Milton Keynes Central and Northampton. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
We want to make the new year your best year yet, with a chance to win our greatest cash prize to date. A simply stunning £85,000 in tax-free cash could be yours. Treat the family to that bucket list holiday you've always fancied. Get your dream car you've always wanted. Or just relax, safe in the knowledge that the coming year is on us. For another chance to win £85,000 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB18 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 30th of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Bold.
They are under no illusion.
Ray.
Are you a human trafficker?
Boundless. I've had enough of the nonsense, and I'm not afraid to say it.
Don't get us on the BBC.
Every weeknight, I tear through the headlines.
The smell of gasoline. Should we be worried about it?
From Westminster madness to cultural war chaos.
What we're going to do now is they are throwing things up the car as we speak.
Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Patrick Christie tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Dewbs & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
All too often, people will be sitting at home watching a press conference live, and they'll hear loads of questions being asked, and they'll be thinking, that's not my question. That's not my concern.
We don't care whose feathers we ruffle. We ask the questions that you want answering.
You're all standing on the street protesting and want to have an open discussion.
My name is Patrick Christie. I do a show for GB News in the UK. Is it possible to talk to you quickly?
Journalism in this country has been a cosy world full of groupthink until now. Well, this is the best view ever of Whitehall, looking out across all the tractor drivers of England who've come together to make their point.
Hello, so as you can see, I'm here in Westminster as the protest begins.
Yes, I'm very much in the thick of it.
Look, we're challenging narratives here at GB News, and that's what sets us apart.
Good evening, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Miriam Cates and you're watching GB News. Coming up in the next hour, the government claims that an alleged Egyptian extremist cannot be stripped of his British citizenship, despite revelations that Alaa Abdel Fattah called for Zionists to be killed and described British people as dogs and monkeys. We'll be asking how Abdel Fattah gained citizenship in the first place and why senior politicians were so desperate for him to come to Britain. And Britain's entrepreneurs are rushing to sell their companies and even move abroad ahead of rising taxes on investments next year. Britain's wealth creators say that starting a business in the UK is no longer worth the risk, but will the government make another U-turn? And the French policing union says non to stopping the boats as proposed new tactics stall over police safety fears. But why should the rights of those crossing the Channel illegally trump the rights of British citizens to a secure border? Elsewhere, the Liberal Democrats claim that the monthly number of GP appointments with a 4-week wait has risen by nearly 250,000 since Labour took office. The government says the figures are being misrepresented, but who's right? And what can be done to relieve pressure on the nation's GPs? And joining me tonight, I have my panel, the pollster and academic Matt Goodwin and Labour MP Barry Gardiner. But first, your latest news headlines.
Very good evening to you. It's 6:05 in the GB newsroom. Downing Street has defended the entry of a freed British-Egyptian campaigner to the UK, despite historic social media posts it's described as abhorrent. Alaa Abdel Fattah, who was recently released after years of imprisonment in Egypt, has appeared to call for violence against Zionists and the police. Sir Keir Starmer under pressure to revoke the activist citizenship, but the government insists it would welcome the return of any citizen unfairly detained abroad. Mr Abdel Fattah, a leading voice in Egypt's Arab Spring uprising in 2011, has apologised and says his words have been completely twisted. Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp says he should be deported.
He said he hated white people, he described white people as dogs, he expressed anti-Semitic views, he called for Jewish civilians to be murdered, he called for Downing Street to be burnt down, he called for the British police to be attacked. This man is a scumbag, he has no place in the UK, and if I was Home Secretary I would strip him of his British citizenship and deport him to Egypt. And if Shabana Mahmood had our country's interests at heart, she would be doing exactly that today.
British boxer Anthony Joshua has been injured in a fatal car crash in southwest Nigeria. Officials believe Mr Joshua's vehicle crashed into a stationary lorry while overtaking at speed on a busy highway north of Lagos. They say the two dead people are male foreign nationals. The two-time heavyweight world champion was taken to hospital with minor injuries, while two other people escaped unhurt. Volodymyr Zelensky says a peace plan to end the war with Russia is 90% agreed after talks with Donald Trump in Florida yesterday. The Ukrainian president added the US has offered 15 years of security guarantees to protect against future Russian aggression, although Mr Zelensky initially asked for 50. The White House described a subsequent call between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin that took place earlier as positive, although the Russian leaders instructed his generals to gain full control of the Donbass and says Ukraine should withdraw from the disputed region if it wants peace. A mother and her two children have been killed in a house fire which destroyed their home in Stroud on Boxing Day. Gloucestershire police say a 7-year-old girl, a 4-year-old boy and their mother, aged in her late 30s, were all trapped inside the burning property. They say their father, a serving officer with the force, managed to escape but was unable to save his family, describing it as a tragic accident. Separately, a child has died and another's been taken to hospital after a house fire in Kent. Emergency services say 3 firefighters suffered minor injuries tackling an intense blaze in the village of Ham Street near Ashford. And 10 men have been named super donors by the NHS. They're the only people in the last 20 years to donate blood, plasma, platelets and stem cells, which are used to treat a variety of injuries and illnesses, including life-threatening accidents and cancer. The group of men aged between 31 and 64 have been praised for their dedication in helping as many people as they can. Those are your headlines. I'll be back with more at 7.
Welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Miriam Kate, and joining me until 7 o'clock, I've got my panel, the pollster, academic and GB News presenter Matt Goodwin and Labour MP Barry Gardiner. And of course, please do get your views in at gbnews.com/your say. Now, as we just heard in the bulletins, Volodymyr Zelensky has said a peace plan to end the war with Russia is 90% agrees. This is after talks with Donald Trump in Florida yesterday. Well, just get a quick reaction from the panel on that. Matt, it does feel sometimes like we've heard it all before, or we've been marched up the hills, we've been marched back down again, or could there be a real prospect of peace?
Well, I hope there is, because we can't have 2026 looking like 2025 and 2024. A lot of people are dying, a lot of people are being injured. We have to get this peace deal over the line. What's that going to look like? And how are we going to do it so that Ukrainians don't feel as though they are losing dignity in the process?
Absolutely. And Barry, we're hearing that it's 90% agreed, but the remaining 10% are very tricky sticking points about territory and about American peace guarantees.
Yeah, Miriam, it's always the last 10%, isn't it? It's the Donbass. That is absolutely critical. I understand that Putin is demanding territory that his troops are not currently occupying, indeed that are being occupied by Ukrainian troops. And look, it was perhaps inevitable that there would be some sort of land swap here, but I think Europe has to be very, very cautious about this. And the security guarantees that we understand are going to be further negotiated between the coalition of the willing, as it's called, in January in Paris, is going to be absolutely vital, because there was a treaty before Russia invaded Ukraine. That treaty guaranteed the sovereign state of Ukraine, and it was violated.
Yep, the 1994 Budapest Memorandum. I can't even say that word. When we promised to protect Ukraine on condition of them giving up their nuclear weapons. Well, it didn't quite happen like that. Well, let's move on to our top story today. And it's a story you really couldn't make up, because last weekend, the Egyptian activist Alaa Abdel Fattah arrived in the UK, having been released from a Cairo jail where he'd been imprisoned for anti-government political activism. Well, Al Fattah was welcomed by his family, but also by the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, who said this: "I'm delighted that Alaa Abdel Fattah is back in the UK and has been reunited with his loved ones, who must be feeling profound relief. Alaa's case has been a top priority for my government since we came to office. I'm grateful to President Sisi for his decision to grant the pardon." However, it has since emerged that Al Fattah has a record of making violent and anti-Semitic statements on social media, such as calling for the killing of police. Now, questions began to be asked about how Al Fattah was able to gain British citizenship back in 2021, and it has emerged that he was able to evade good character checks after taking advantage of a legal loophole created by another criminal who made a claim against the ECHR. So it's human rights law 1, British citizens 0. Well, Sir Keir Starmer is now under pressure to strip Al Fattah of his citizenship, although he has this afternoon said that he will not be doing that. So we're asking, why were politicians so keen to support the Egyptian in the first place? Barry, can you shed any light on that?
Well, look, what Al Fattah said 15 years ago in those tweets was vicious, it was horrible, and it was racist. And in 2021, when your Conservative government was in post, Miriam, it was Priti Patel who was the Home Secretary, and clearly there was a failure in the proper vetting that should have gone and taken place when citizenship was granted to this man. But it is ironic that the Conservatives are now trying to blame the Labour government for respecting the citizenship rights which they gave him. But look, as far as reform's concerned, I'd think that after their recent defence of Nigel Farage and it being unreasonable to hold him to account for the historic comments that he's reported to have made...
When he was 13.
This is 16, actually. This is something that they would have been better not to comment on, because the more they they say that al-Fatah should be held responsible, the more it looks like they're doing special pleading on Farage.
A very tenuous comparison there. But
no, I don't think so at all, actually. But look, I mean, it's 15 years ago. The key point, I think, is this. Can we actually take this man's citizenship away? And it seems to me that my understanding is in order to do that, you have to be able to say that the citizen is a current security risk to the United Kingdom. And 15-year-old tweets, which he has since disavowed, are probably not the basis on which you're going to be able to do that. And at least he has apologised for them and disavowed them, which Mr Farage has not.
Matt, I will absolutely let you respond to those accusations about Nigel Farage. But firstly, isn't it the point that there were no vetting procedures because al-Fatah used this loophole that another criminal was able to create, which meant that claiming citizenship through your maternal line means you can evade these checks in the first place?
So there are so many things about this case that are really significant. I mean, the first is this is a symbol of the Uniparty. Both Labour and the Conservatives wanted this guy into the country. But as you say, fundamentally, this is actually about the European Convention on Human Rights, the Human Rights Act, being used to allow people into our country who, to be frank, should not have citizenship. And ultimately, the deeper question underneath this case is, what does it mean to be British? Now, I believe that citizenship is not the same as belonging. And belonging requires more than a piece of paper. Now, as a country, we have to have this debate. Why are we tolerating people who clearly, based on this guy's statements, do not tolerate us? We have to have this discussion. But the other thing, briefly, Miriam, is talk about Nigel Farage, Barry. Westminster is obsessed with what Nigel Farage said 50 years ago because they don't want to talk about what Nigel Farage is saying about the country today. And what he's saying is, we are sick and tired of having people in our country who hate us, who hate white people, who hate Jews, who hate Western civilization, and the era of tolerating people who hate us is over. Margaret Thatcher said this, but nobody has ever taken action ever since Thatcher said it. And it's time now. We have to draw a line in the sand.
Well, look, I would agree with you that we don't want people who are inciting hatred in this country, OK? There is no difference between us on that point. But the legislation is in place that says if you incite racial hatred, if you incite people to violence in this country, then the law will take action against you. And that law has been put in place since Margaret Thatcher, actually, and it's been put in place by a Labour government. So I think it's absolutely right that we should not be tolerating people stirring up hatred. We should not be tolerating people inciting violence.
Barry, do you understand? Many people out there are wondering, why was Lucy Connolly put in prison, right, for the best part of 3 years for tweeting what she tweeted? This guy has said there was no genocide against Jews by the Nazis. After all, many Jews are left. Do you understand why people are out there thinking this is a crystal clear case of a two-tier Britain? Labour seemed deeply hypocritical, totally adrift with the country, has also, by the way, said really, really disgusting things about white people. It's anti-white racism, that's what this is. Do you understand how hypocritical the left looked to the country today?
Look, let's be clear. It was not the left that gave this man citizenship. OK?
Celebrated his return.
No. That's
Barry,
that. Sorry, hang on, because you know that's not right.
Here, Barry,
because they celebrated his return in his rights as a British citizen being allowed to come back from Egypt.
But Barry,
they did not know at that point. The Prime Minister didn't know at that point.
How did he not know,
about the previous
tweets? Can I just make a point? Because the Conservative government granted him citizenship. Now, Giles Dilnot, who was a former advisor to Boris Johnson, has said today that it was all about putting pressure on the Egyptian government. Now, you can believe that if you want, who knows. But the Labour government have actively campaigned for his transfer to Britain since they came back to office. Keir Starmer has said that he's been working on this since he came into power. Why is the government so desperate to get him here?
What I want to know is why did nobody in the security services tell the government about these historic tweets? Because in your own introduction, Miriam, you rightly said that people only knew about those tweets after he came back into the country. So the point is this. the government fights for British citizens. And the Egyptian government were doing something that was profoundly wrong to a British citizen. They'd imprisoned him on trumped-up charges, basically. And we then ensured, even though after he'd been released from prison, he was being forced to remain in Egypt, not allowed to come back to the UK, which is his country, his right, we enforced the rights which you gave him.
Hang on, why is this guy British?
He's British because the Conservatives allowed him to become a British citizen.
Can I ask you, I'm asking you a direct question. Do you think this man is British?
It's a matter of law that he is British.
Right, and that is exactly the problem.
No, it's not, actually, because if we tear up the laws in order to you know, I don't know if you remember the scene in A Man for All Seasons where Thomas More says that to Will. It's about you don't tear down the laws in order to get
the point being, sorry, just briefly,
because
the point
then
being,
when the devil
Barry,
turns
the point
on
being
you,
that
where will
everybody
you
out
hide?
there knows this, everyone watching this show knows this. British citizenship has been so devalued to the point that anybody can become British the moment they arrive on these islands and they sign a piece of paper. What they don't have, clearly, and I'm looking at this guy's tweets as I'm talking to you, in December 2010, I'm proud of being racist against whites, April 2011. I hate white people.
Terrible.
Why is this guy actually being given citizenship? Doesn't being British mean a lot more than opening the doors to people like that?
I agree with you 100%.
So let's revoke his citizenship.
That's why I said he should never have been allowed citizenship.
So would you agree that we should revoke his citizenship?
I think the law means that he has got that citizenship, and in order to take it away from him, you have to prove that it would be a security risk to allow him to continue as a British citizen.
We're going to have to leave it.
That's the issue.
We're going to have to leave it there, but Barry, I do think, given that the law that allowed him in is only a few years old, it's hardly Magna Carta. It's not exactly ditching our entire legal system to tear that one up, is it? The loophole.
It's not about the loophole, right?
Well, it is about the loophole because that's let him in. But anyway, we've got to move on. It is a crazy story. But coming up, Britain's wealth creators say that starting a business in the UK is no longer worth the risk. So will the government make another U-turn? Stick with us.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Dewbs, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact that Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power?
Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber.
Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics.
We'll see where this ruling takes us.
These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health, Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Miriam Cates, keeping me company until 7 o'clock. I've got Matt Goodwin and Barry Gardner. Now, moving on to an interesting story today. Britain's entrepreneurs are rushing to sell off their companies ahead of what they fear will be a tax raid by Rachel Reeves on the nation's wealth creators. Well, a surge in deal-making, which is being driven by plans to scale back tax relief for entrepreneurs, has fuelled concerns about an exodus of companies from the UK, with 1 in 4 entrepreneurs now saying they plan to leave Britain in the next 12 months. Matt, we've already heard figures of young people generally leaving the country, but this is particularly concerning because these are the people who are our only hope for growth and productivity.
So I'm obviously very concerned about the state of the economy because the people who are leaving are the job creators, the wealth drivers, the prosperity generators. Now, what's basically happening is we're in an economic doom loop. We are losing these talented investors and company builders, and we're replacing them with low-skill, low-wage migrants from outside of Europe who we know from the Migration Advisory Committee last week are a net fiscal cost to the British taxpayer. So this is partly a legacy of Boris Johnson and the Boris wave, but it is actually, I would argue, a legacy of the last 30 years, a consensus on both the left and the right, which is that we will use ongoing mass uncontrolled immigration, importing cheap migrant labour to basically keep profits high and costs low. And the end result is a lot of entrepreneurs and business people who are now being clobbered by Rachel Reeves's tax increases, business rates are going up, the cost of just hiring people is going up, it's becoming overwhelming. They're saying, you know what, why am I here? Why am I not in Dubai? Why am I not in Italy? Why am I not in, Estonia or wherever else? And so we have to get out of this doom loop. And the way you do that is lower taxes, slash regulation, end mass uncontrolled immigration, which is suppressing our economy, and start allowing these companies to expand and hire more British workers, because don't forget we've got 9 million working-age Brits on welfare, more than half of whom are not even required to look for work. So this economic model that we now have makes absolutely no sense, no economic sense whatsoever.
Barry, there does seem to be a particular problem here, though, with the entrepreneurs' relief, which Rachel Reeves has raised significantly. Now, everybody knew that the government would raise taxes in the budget, but this does seem a little bit of an own goal, because if it's no longer worth taking the risk to invest in your own company, you're not going to do it. You're going to go elsewhere, or you're going to sell.
Let me try and address that, because we're talking about here is a change in the tax relief for selling a company, right? And at the moment, the standard capital gains tax is 24%. If you use the business asset disposals relief, that means you are actually just getting taxed at 14%. Now, the people that are saying that they're now going to be rushing to sell are the people who have started up a business with the intention of selling it off, making that profit, and they're saying, quite understandably, before April, when that relief will reduce to 6% instead of 10%, I'm going to try and make sure I get the 10% rather than 6%. Quite understand that, no issues with it. But But the rush to sell is from people who were already going to be selling their startup company. Now, I think there's a problem here, and I agree with some of the analysis that Matt gave, but let me put a different slant on it. I think the question we should be asking is whether we should be constantly encouraging the people who have started up these amazing companies using the research often spun off from universities, whether we should be encouraging them to sell at this early stage. Now, maybe we should be making it less attractive to sell a startup company, because we've all seen it. We have these amazing inventions, these amazing companies that start up in the UK. What happens is private equity comes in. They say, hey, bud, you know, you've got a great startup here. We'll take it from you. We'll take it over to America, right? They buy it out. Who then gets the benefit? Who then gets the profit? Not the UK, but actually people in America.
Can I just come in briefly on that, Barry?
Yeah, can I just finish the point, though? The issue here is they are the predators here, and I think we should be making it less attractive to sell off a startup, but we need to be encouraging, and this is the point where I think Matt and I will agree, we need to be encouraging those really entrepreneurial people who are using the research base that our fantastic universities give to keep this in the UK. And that's about ensuring that long-term they have government support to go what is called through the valley of death, from the initial start-up to a development stage to full commercialisation. And that's where government needs to inject funds to do that.
Then if we really wanted to support entrepreneurs, we would be slashing net zero, and we'd be slashing business rates. Listen to what bosses have said themselves. This is what they've said themselves. They are attacking Rachel Reeves for failing to address soaring energy prices and hitting many companies with higher business rates. So I agree with you. We want these companies to grow over the longer term, create more jobs. But Barry, put yourself in their shoes. They're getting clobbered with the highest industrial energy prices in the Western world, increased business rates, increased national insurance. The cost of hiring people is through the roof. You cannot build a successful business in Britain anymore.
Well,
Barry, can I just come in? So can we just go back, though, Matt, to what Barry was saying about startups, because that's absolutely true. All these costs for businesses are a problem, but particularly for entrepreneurs. Barry's right. In this country, we do have a problem with so many of our startups being sold, particularly to Americans, before they have chance to make money. That this does not happen in France and Germany and Italy because they have rules to stop it.
Yes.
I think we need rules like that.
Perhaps, but I think we also need an environment that actually supports business creators and job creators. And the problem we have at the moment, we have a hostile environment for entrepreneurs. Most entrepreneurs are not here. They're going to Dubai. They're elsewhere in the world.
Matt, I'm so sorry. I'm going to interrupt you because we're going to cross to the US, because President Trump and the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, are meeting live in Florida. So we've got President Trump there, and we understand he's going to be meeting with Netanyahu to discuss the Gaza peace plan, which, of course, in September, Trump hailed having stopped the war between Israel and Gaza. There are still some of those details left to iron out. Here's Netanyahu greeting him outside Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort. Now, Netanyahu has already met today with Marco Rubio and Steve Witkoff, two of Trump's closest allies, to discuss the ceasefire. He's speaking now.
Last 3 days.
President Trump, are you going to have a green light for another attack in Iran?
Okay.
Mr. President, how quickly can you folks move to phase 2 of the peace plan for Gaza?
As quickly as we can, but there has to be a disarmament. You know that we have to disarm with Hamas. So one of the things we'll talk about certainly, but there has to be a disarming of Hamas. Otherwise, very quickly. Yeah.
Can you say anything more about the explosion in Venezuela that you mentioned in a radio interview? Did the military do that? Can you share more details about
Well, it doesn't matter, but there was a major explosion in the dock area where they load the boats up with drugs. They load the boats up with drugs, so we hit all the boats, and now we hit the area. It's the implementation area. That's where they implement, and that is no longer around.
not the only strike that the U.S. has done.
I don't want to comment.
President Trump. Yesterday there was an explosion overnight and the Russians say that Ukraine tried to hit the residence of President Putin. Do you have any information?
No, I don't know about it, actually, and I don't, I just heard about it, actually, but I don't know about it. No.
Did you speak with
That would be too bad. That would not be good.
What was the outcome of your telephone call with President Putin this morning?
I had a very good talk this morning. I waited till this morning because it was pretty late by the time we finished, like 2:30 in Russia, 2:30 in the morning, and we had a very good talk. We spoke at 8 o'clock in the morning our time, and it was a very productive talk. I mean, we have a few very thorny issues, as you can imagine. He knows about thorny issues probably better than anybody in the world, but it's working out. We have a couple of issues that we're going to get resolved, hopefully, and if we get them resolved, you're going to have peace. You're going to have Ukraine. They're losing 26,000 soldiers a month. Can you believe it? A month, 26,000 young, beautiful soldiers, and plus some people in Kiev, and relatively small, but a lot, you know, still people, and it's a lot of people. But 26,000 soldiers were killed last month. Yes, please.
President Trump, are you going to allow Turkish forces, or do you expect Turkish forces to be stationed in Gaza?
So I have a great relationship with President Erdogan, and we'll be talking about it. And if it's good, I think that's good. And a lot will be having to do with Bibi. We're going to be talking about that. But Turkey's been great, and he's been, you know, excellent as far as I'm concerned. I don't know about you. To me, he's been very good.
Can you guarantee that?
Sure. Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about your relationship with Prime Minister Netanyahu and how important it is for you to see him be pardoned by the Israeli president?
Look, he's a wartime prime minister. He's done a phenomenal job. He's taken Israel through a very dangerous period of trauma. Israel, with other people, might not exist right now, if you want to know the truth. That's a pretty big statement, but it's true. I feel that. You had the wrong prime minister. Israel right now would not exist because they were met with a force the likes of which very few countries could have handled, and we worked together, and we were extremely victorious, to put it mildly. Now I hear that Iran is trying to build up again, and if they are, we're going to have to knock them down. We'll knock them down. We'll knock the hell out of them, but hopefully that's not happening. I heard Iran wants to make a deal. If they want to make a deal, that's much smarter. You know, they could have made a deal the last time before we went through, you know, a big attack on them, and they decided not to make the deal. They wish they made that deal. So I think, again, they should make a deal. They want to make a deal, but sometimes that doesn't happen. Yeah, please.
Mr. Trump, hi. Nadav Elimelech, 24 News Israel. Would you support the overthrow of the Iranian regime?
Of who?
Iranian regime.
I'm not going to talk about overthrow of a regime. It's, they've got a lot of problems in Iran. They have tremendous inflation. Their economy is bust. Their economy is no good. And I know that people aren't so happy, but don't forget, every time they have a riot or somebody forms a group, little or big, they start shooting people. You know, they kill people. And the people tend to, I've watched this for years, there's tremendous discontent. They form 100,000, 200,000 people. All of a sudden, people start getting shot. And that group disbands pretty quickly. So I've watched it for years. They're vicious, vicious people, yeah.
Mr. President, will you support an attack, Israeli attack on Iran, if Iran will not have a deal? If Iran will continue with their ballistic missiles and also nuclear weapons?
If they will continue with the missiles, yes. The nuclear, fast. Okay? One will be yes, absolutely. The other was, we'll do it immediately.
Mr. President, Yaron Avraham from Channel 12 News. What are your plans regarding Gaza for the next few weeks?
Well, we're going to be dealing on Gaza. That's why this very great prime minister is here right now. We're talking about Gaza. We're talking about a lot of things. We have about 5 major subjects that we're discussing, and Gaza will be one of those subjects.
Mr. President, can you guarantee that the last hostages, Ran Philip, will be released before we continue to the second phase of the Gaza plan?
Well, let's put it this way, every hostage just about that's been released was released because of me, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, my whole team, Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth. They were all released because of us. None were released in the Biden administration, none. They were all released because of us. Then we had a lack of releases with respect to the dead. And all of a sudden they started coming back because I said, nope, you said you were going to. We have one wonderful young man whose parents are right now inside. And he's, what beautiful parents, a beautiful brother, sister, and like a beautiful family, and they're waiting for their son. It's the only one left, and we're doing everything we can to get his body back. And the parents just said, hopefully he's alive. And I said, I'd love you to think that way. Okay?
President Trump.
Everything we can.
Do you have President Trump?
Out of all of these people, and I'm not just talking about the final 20.
Right.
Look at all of the people. What do you think the total number is?
255.
255.
254 came out, one more.
Think of that. And we got them all.
President Trump. President Trump, does the reconstruction of Gaza, President Trump, does the reconstruction of Gaza, does the reconstruction of Gaza will begin even before Hamas is disarmed?
I think it's going to begin pretty soon, yeah.
Before Hamas
He's looking forward to it, so am I. Look, what a mess. What a mess it is. And it's been a mess for centuries, really. It's been a mess for a long time. It's seems to be born for that, but we're gonna straighten it out. No, we're already starting certain things. We're doing things for sanitary conditions and others. But Gaza's a tough place. You know the expression, it's a tough neighborhood. That's truly a tough neighborhood. Yeah, you had a question in the back? Go ahead. Yeah, please, go ahead.
I'll ask you about the relationship between you and the Prime Minister.
What about it?
They said that there is no good relationship between you.
I don't think it can be better. We just won a big war together. You know, if we didn't beat Iran, you wouldn't have had peace in the Middle East because nobody would have been able, the Arab countries who have been fantastic would not have been able to make a deal. If we didn't wipe out their nuclear, we wiped it out. If we didn't wipe out with our beautiful B-2 bombers, if we didn't, and we sent a lot of Tomahawks in there also, by the way, from a submarine.
And what about the pardon that the President of Israel needs to give the Prime Minister?
A pardon?
A pardon.
Oh, I think he will. How do you not? He's a wartime Prime Minister who's a hero. How do you not give a pardon? You know, I think it's a very hard thing not to do it. I spoke to the President, and it's on, I mean, he tells me it's on its way.
Mr.
You
President.
can't do better than that, right? Please.
Mr. President, can I follow up on Venezuela? Was the facility taken out by the U.S. military, or was it another entity like the CIA?
Well, I don't want to say that. I know exactly who it was, but I don't want to say who it was. But you know, it was along the shore.
Mr. President, have you or anyone in your administration talked to Maduro in recent days?
Well, I spoke to him.
Recently?
Pretty recently. Reasonably, but nothing much comes of it, yeah.
Mr. President, can you explain the importance?
You have to understand what he's done. They've sent billions of dollars of drugs in, but maybe just as bad, they've sent hundreds of thousands of people in from jails, from prisons, from mental institutions and insane asylums. The drug lords, the drug dealers were all sent into our country. But think of it, what he's done. Tren de Aragua, probably the worst gang. They cut off people's fingers. One man made a phone call to complain about them. He cut off their hand. They cut off his hand. Don't ever make a phone call again. We'll cut off your other hand. After that, we'll kill you, they said. That was in Colorado. No, they sent in all of the bad ones. They sent in some bad people. And that to me was just terrible. And they send in drugs. Now, I will say this. 97% of the drugs coming in by sea stopped. We're trying to figure out who the other 3% are. They have a hard time getting people to pilot those boats. But 97% of the drugs coming in by the ocean, by the sea, by water, are gone. Every boat that we take out, we save 25,000 lives of Americans. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you. We're going to have a big meeting. and we'll see you in a couple of hours if you'd like. And if you'd like, you can come up and have lunch like you did yesterday. Would you like that or not? Do you want that? Because some of them think it's terrible, it's a bribe. But, you know, a bribe for $25, I don't know. If you'd like, you can go, and if you don't, you can stand in a driveway and melt. All right? But if you want, will you work on that, Margot? Yes, sir. Is Margot doing a good job? She's a star. She's too nice. Her only problem is she's too nice to you. And you're not nice to us, but that's okay. Margot, take them up and have a beautiful lunch, and we'll see you later.
I was worried that the alleged strike on Putin's residence could scuttle the peace.
Yeah, I don't like it. It's not good. I heard about it this morning. You know who told me about it? President Putin told me about it. Early in the morning, he said he was attacked. It's no good. It's no good. Don't forget, you know, the Tomahawks. I stopped the Tomahawks. I didn't want that. Because we're talking about, you know, it's a delicate period of time. This is not the right time. It's one thing to be offensive, because they're offensive. It's another thing to attack his house. It's not the right time to do any of that, and can't do it. And I learned about it from President Putin today. I was very angry about it. Please. What? Well, it came out, well, we'll find out. I mean, you're saying maybe the attack didn't take place. It's possible too, I guess. But President Putin told me this morning it did.
One question, Mr. President. Can you expound on the importance of a strong relationship with the State of Israel? And Mr. Prime Minister, you called President Trump the strongest friend for the State of Israel. You work with numerous administrations, numerous presidents. Can you expound on that and what makes President Trump such a strong friend for the State of Israel?
Why don't you go first?
I'll say it again and again and again. We've never had a friend like President Trump in the White House. It's not even close. And I think you can judge that by not merely by the frequency of our meetings, but by the content and the intensity. I think Israel is very blessed to have President Trump leading the United States, and I'll say leading the free world at this time. I think it's not merely Israel's great fortune, I think it's the world's great fortune.
Well, I just want to say that it's very important who the Prime Minister and President of Israel is. We have a great relationship. It was an honor to speak before your leaders. That was a great honor for me. I think it has not happened before, or something they told me. But the relationship's been extraordinary, and Bibi's a strong man. He can be very difficult on occasion, but you need a strong man. If you had a weak man, you wouldn't have Israel right now. Israel would have been, you know, Israel with most other leaders would not exist today. They would not exist. And now they're stronger than ever. Yeah, please.
Are you going to ask Netanyahu to sign an agreement with Syria?
Well, I hope he's going to get along with Syria, because the new president of Syria is working very hard to do a good job. He really is. I know he's a tough cookie, and he's, you know, you're not going to get a choir boy to lead Syria. That's the one thing I would say. So I hope they're going to get along, because, you know, I dropped the sanctions on Syria because otherwise they wouldn't have had a chance. We want to see Syria survive. So we're going to be talking about Syria too. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good time. Go have a good lunch.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Prime Minister Netanyahu, there's a lot of facts regarding.
You know, after you hear these things, I think better to quit now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that's President Trump and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu going back into Mar-a-Lago, having answered many, many questions from journalists. As always, Trump answering questions from all comers, Barry.
He did. Well, answer is perhaps not the right word. He responded to many questions. Look, I think what we all want to know is, what is the conversation that he's now going to have as he walks into Mar-a-Lago going to produce? That's a really important conversation with Netanyahu. Are we going to see the remains of the last hostage returned? That's really important to every Israeli and should be really important to everyone. It's a vital stage in establishing a peace process. And the other, of course, is there going to be the demilitarization of Hamas? And that is equally important. But that is extremely unlikely for as long as what we're seeing in terms of the Israeli occupation continues, and the increasing problems that I think Israel is creating for itself by going in more and more to those occupied territories on the West Bank and displacing the settlers, the whole settler movement. That is really something that could destabilise the peace, such as it is. It's incredibly fragile. We need to see this taken forward, and that's what those two have got to go in there and start talking seriously about.
Matt, they have historically had a difficult relationship, but Trump there was showering Netanyahu with praise, he called him a wartime hero, said that Israel might not exist without Netanyahu.
Well, I think that's true. I think they have had a difficult relationship, but they've also at the same time been exceptionally close because of the Jared Kushner connection, because of the Trump family connections. So I think in some sense what Netanyahu said then was quite significant, which is from their perspective, thank goodness it was President Trump and not, say, President Kamala Harris, who was in charge of the world at this particular point. But there's something else going on here, which is, we're not that far off from the midterms. We're coming up to halfway through Trump 2. He is now thinking about cementing his geopolitical legacy. He's not just thinking about what have I done domestically with the border, but actually how have I reshaped the world? What's my legacy going to be? And all of these things now are obviously coming to the fore with Trump. And he's thinking maybe, as he described it famously, the greatest deal of all time is peace in the Middle East.
Matt, you're absolutely right about the midterms. And OK, it's not until November this coming year. But they are going to be crucial, and they're going to be crucial for the American economy and for the world economy, because what we're seeing is America facing a real problem with its mounting trillions of debt, but also the Fed is reducing interest rates, and it seems to be on that trajectory, but inflation's going up. And if he gets it wrong economically, then the midterms are really a problem for him, because at the moment it looks as if the Democrats will take the House at midterm. They probably won't take the Senate. Well,
what's a growth rate in America right now?
But what we've seen is historically of the 20 midterm elections, the 20 past midterm elections in each of those presidencies, the non-incumbent or the incumbent has lost one of the houses or both.
Stock market record high though, Barry. Come on, growth rate's what, 4%?
Absolutely.
Migration's coming down, which is interesting for the UK debate, because we're often told you can't have falling migration and economic growth, but actually in the US you can.
But we have a very different demography because we've got an ageing population, and we need the workforce. Now, you were right to make earlier the point about the people who are currently not in employment and who need to be got into employment and helped to get into employment. That's really important. But actually, it's a very different demography here and in the States.
Matt, how much credit do you think Trump is getting domestically for some of his foreign policy interventions? Because certainly during the election, one of the reasons that he wanted to end all the wars is because American people were getting fed up with Americans' involvement. Now, it's gone on for a lot longer than Trump promised, but nevertheless, he has had some success.
I mean, it's difficult to know. I'm not an expert on, US polling, but one of the interesting things to me about MAGA was it was always very much a nation-first movement. It was quite isolationist. It was, we don't want forever wars. We don't want ongoing intervention. I think there is a big part of the MAGA base that is just not interested in the Middle East. It's just not interested in what's going on in Yemen and Somalia. And, we've seen potentially some bombings there. Nigeria, they're just not really that interested. I do think the MAGA movement generally now is at this very interesting fork in the roads where you do have the old Republican Guard saying, actually, we do want America to be the world's policeman. We do think that that role is still worth filling. But then you've got the new generation who are coming up, and I don't want to name names, but the obvious contenders on social media who've been creating this civil war within MAGA are very much of the view that, well, forget everybody else. We're America first. Nothing else matters. We're not interested in Israel. We're not interested in Palestine. We're not interested in Nigeria. And I don't think Trump's going to be able to solve that before he leaves office. I think that sort of internal conflict within the MAGA movement, which it's never been able to reconcile, I think is going to have to be dealt with by Trump's successor.
That isolationist point that you made is absolutely right. And I think we very often have a very foolish view of America, as of course they understand global politics and where people are. I mean, it's like asking somebody in Middle America to focus on Yemen is like asking somebody in Birmingham whether they know where Almaty is. You know, it's a long way away. You've got 1,500 miles from the middle of America to any ocean. You then have to go another couple of thousand miles before you get to land. They think, why should we be interested in this? And actually, the centrality of the American economy, the fact that the world uses dollars, means that their economy is dependent on them taking that global view, but many of their people in the US really don't.
Well, we do have a few minutes left on the show, so I do want to move on to our final story, which is that French police have refused to stop small boat migrants from crossing the Channel by incapacitating their vessels. Well, the unions representing police officers have blocked plans for police to stop the dinghies by using tactics such as jamming the propellers on the grounds that they could face prosecution if any migrants died as a result. Now, Matt, one of the things that Keir Starmer was pinning his hopes on was this change in the French law that was supposed to enable the French police to turn the dinghies back, but that now seems off the table.
Well, I think you're right, Miriam. I think, you know, we're at the end of 2025. We're looking back at another disastrous year for our border security. More than 41,000 illegal migrants have crossed into the country, nearly 200,000 under both Conservative and Labour since 2018, at a cost of £15 billion or so just on accommodation for the British taxpayer, about £5 billion a year policing the border. It's absolutely bonkers. The only way you solve this crisis, and I appreciate Barry and I will have different views, but my view is clear. The only way you solve this crisis is leaving the ECHR, repealing the Human Rights Act, detaining and deporting anybody who arrives illegally, processing them offshore. It doesn't really matter what the French are doing and what they're not doing. Until we control our laws, we won't control our borders. That is the simple reality of this. Now, if Labour get ahead of it and they actually accept that reality and they start to pursue that reality, they will not be demolished in the Red Wall and Wales and many other areas by reform. If they continue to play this ridiculous game of one in, one out and shake it all about, reform will absolutely demolish Labour across those heartlands. And Barry, I've got to be honest with you, I think this, you know, look, have you ever been as low as 14% in the polls? This could be the death of the Labour Party on this border issue.
Well, look, you see, I agree with much of what you've said. The problem is huge. It hasn't been helped by the police and the disruption in the French government, the sort of chaos in the French government and the negotiations they've had with their judiciary. OK, that hasn't helped matters. But it's not just about that. It is about changing the international framework in which all of this is done. And where I think you and I would part company is you seem to think that us simply saying we're no longer bound by the ECHR is going to change things. On the ground, it's not going to enable us to send people back any easier, because the key point is, will those countries accept them? And at the moment, you try and send people back to France, France won't accept them, and even if you manage to get them back, the chances are they'll just try again. So it's actually not as simple as saying we're going to leave the ECHR. You can't just do that. You have to work internationally to create a new international settlement around migration.
Well, as Labour have just shown, you can use foreign aid, visa penalties and more to force migrants back. I don't want to send them back to France. I want to send them back to Eritrea, Afghanistan, Pakistan and more, OK? And that means we need to start getting tough. Why did we just give Pakistan £111 million for condoms and family planning, while at the same time, one of the top nationalities that is claiming asylum in this country is Pakistan? This doesn't make any sense to me anymore. If we actually... Look, fundamentally, across the West, right, what I think we're entering into now is an era where you either believe in national preference, in the sovereignty of borders, in controlling your own territory, or you're buying into this universalism, globalism kind of stuff, your ECHR and so on. I think that latter view is so out of step with where voters are now. Everyone out there is saying, I just want control of my country. And the nation-state, Barry, is the only organisation we've ever had that's ever worked for people. The nation-state. We've never managed supranational governance. It's the nation. We need to defend the nation, control the borders, do whatever is necessary to do that, and control our laws.
I would just
Quick
make
final
one
word,
very
very
quick
quick.
point on that is the United Kingdom is a very good example of where nation states came together and managed to work together for more than 300 years.
Very diplomatic note to end on. Well, thank you so much to my panel for joining me tonight. Up next, we've got Farage with Ben Leo. I'll be back in the morning for Britain's Newsroom and again for Dewbs. Have a good evening.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good evening, welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. A frosty night to come for much of Scotland, staying dry wherever you are, but there's still a brisk northerly breeze bringing that cold feel. We've got high pressure dominating our weather, that northerly wind moving in around